Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we have Pat Sherwood. Now, many of you may have heard and seen Pat over the years being one of the most recognizable faces on the CrossFit Games Update show, but Pat has been around the sport since 2005 and has held many different roles, one being an affiliate owner of CrossFit Linchpin up in Washington. He was also a member of CrossFit HQ training staff, having worked over 200 seminars over the years, and he has even programmed some events at the CrossFit Games. Prior to getting into CrossFit, Pat was a Navy SEAL for 7 years, and we go into a little bit of what his mindset is when it comes to programming and coaching. Pat has a very nuanced approach to the artistic aspect that goes into being a programmer of weekly and daily WODs. Love speaking with him because I think mine, and Chad's approach to technique matches up really well with the way that Pat coaches and programs. I think you'll find some really interesting pieces in here. We hope you enjoy this one.
Pat Sherwood, it's good to see you, man. It's been too long. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
For sure. Well, I'm going to jump in with the first question that I'm most curious about when I think about Pat Sherwood. I got into the community I learned what CrossFit was in mid 2008, started coaching in the community in early 2010. And you've been a staple in the community ever since then. And I'm wondering, one, how long have you been in the community of CrossFit, and why have you stayed involved in really contributing in the ways that you have all this time?
I did my first CrossFit workout in 2005, after a background that was probably similar to most people at that time, just classic bodybuilding style, chest and tries on Monday and Thursday, back and buys on Tuesday and Friday, and, sprinkling some cardio, sprinkling some crunches, and thought I'd be a beast, man. Had the Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding or whatever it was, and I never quite looked like the pictures. But I did it in 2005. I thought I was in really great shape. It demolished me, which humbled me greatly. And just the way that my brain works, especially thinking that I was in really good shape, when something put me on my butt like that, I just quite frankly found that highly unacceptable. And I was like, if there are people roaming the earth that have this physical capacity and I do not, I'm not good with that. I need to get better at this stuff. And I was hooked, really, from that moment forward. And as we all know, it's never gotten easier. Your times just get better and your lifts go up, but it's never gotten easier.
Right.
And what was the second part of your question?
So yeah, why have you stayed involved in through all these years and in contributing in the ways that you have?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. It just, for lack of a better way to say it feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if that sounds corny, but it's accurate. And I think along the way, I developed, as I've gotten older, a sense of how many mistakes I've made. A tremendous, huge, overwhelming monstrosity of mistakes, I would say, litter my career. And, things, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and do a little bit better. And so a lot of my goals these days is just ideally being very open and honest about those mistakes to help other folks ideally avoid them, or maybe get on a more efficient path sooner than I did, so that, they get a good experience.
Right. Well, talking about the large number of mistakes that you've made, and I would say I have done the same thing as well. And that's what ultimately makes us better. But, wanting to carve a better path for those taking a similar route, what is the one or two biggest mistakes that you made?
Oh, man. Well, I think one of the ones that probably jumps out to me is I probably powered through a whole bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have powered through, whether I should have reduced loading or scaled something or modified something. I certainly had that mindset that the prescribed whatever it was, that was the ideal, and anything shy of the ideal did not meet the objective of the day. And so even if the ideal was wildly inappropriate, who cares? It's that or it's nothing. And I did that for probably far too long. And I think I was just really lucky to not ding myself up more than I did. But that would probably be one of the largest mistakes that jumped out at me. And I just think I had, which makes sense, right? I mean, beginners are beginners, intermediates are intermediate, advanced are advanced. And I think early on in my career, I think I had a more sophisticated knowledge of CrossFit and the methodology and why we do things than I actually did. I think I had a very surface level understanding and didn't really understand the whys. And I think like most young men do, I thought that I was a unique and special snowflake in this world, and that Father Time would not come knocking on my door one day and all of these things. I was the special, unique unicorn that wasn't going to have the whatever. I can blow off my warm-ups. I can blow off my cool down. I feel great all the time. Don't worry about it. That check will never come due. And it comes due for all of us, And so I just look back at a lot of that stuff and I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and just kind of shake some sense into myself.
Can I just expand on it for a second? Because that seems to be a universal thought, right? Like wisdom comes with age. Is there a way, and you being an affiliate owner and someone that's so closely tied to the community and someone that gives wisdom back to the community in so many ways through your podcast, things like that, have you found any way to be able to relate that to the younger generation and say, hey, we've gone through these mistakes. I was you this number of years ago. Can we avoid these mistakes for the generation coming up? Or is it just, you got to have your own path?
Man, training's easy. People are hard.
Yeah.
I think about this. It may be an insulting statement to liken adults to children. This is not intended to be an insulting statement, but it's funny how there are similarities and commonalities and things, because exactly what you're saying. Like if I'm talking to a 25-year-old, a 35-year-old, a 45-year-old, a 55-year-old, and trying to tell them, hey, I've done this, you don't want to do it. But if they haven't learned that lesson for themselves, it's almost 50-50 as to whether or not they're going to listen to me, or they're going to have to run into that wall in themselves. And it's the same thing. I've got 3 kids, and to this day, as a parent, I struggle with probably the same thing my parents did, which is like, look, I'm 30 years older than you. I've done this. It's not going to end well. So I'm going to tell you, don't do this. And then the kid still goes out and does it. And then they go, you weren't lying to me.
Yeah.
So, man, that's always the deal. And I always try to present information in as many different ways as possible, because maybe if you present it 3 different ways, one of those ways will stick with the individual, right? And so, but I haven't found a works every time solution, to be honest with you. It's funny, related to this is like everyone thinks that they're going to be a little bit different, but they're not. This was years ago, maybe like 10 years ago. There was a guy on the media team who was probably around 60 at that point in time. His name was Joe Novello, really good dude, a high-level producer. And I think I was in my mid-30s at the time. And I was doing something, I was reading something, and Joe's like, Pat, do you wear glasses? And I was like, no. And just with all the confidence in the world, he goes, you will. Because it's just like, there are just some things that happens. And now fast forward 10 years later, yeah, I got a set of glasses. It's it's just one of those things.
And
something in you.
Yeah, you're right though. That concept, we are a bunch of children. I don't take offense to that at all. And it doesn't bother me to say that we are just a bunch of kids trying to grow up and learn. Even in our, I think about my parents, love my parents, and they're greatest parents in the world. But I can see kids in them as well, or in my grandma, my grandparents. So it's absolutely true. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
The difference, maybe, to get back to your question, Dave, is the individuals who potentially take it on board. It's probably not that I gave some amazing example that hit home with them. It's probably that those people happen to be, and how it happened to them, I don't know, the sort of person that, whether they're 25 or 55, realized that they don't know everything, realize that they can learn something from anybody in the room, and are open-minded to being like, well, I'll hear you out because there could potentially be validity in what you're saying. And so it's probably just out of dumb luck you happen to have that conversation with the open-minded ones.
Right.
How they became open-minded, that's a rabbit hole we could get down to later.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So some of it is personality trait and who you're speaking with. But I think what you also mentioned is a really great one, just in terms of coaching, being able to create a way to explain information that resonates differently with different individuals. And, there's not
Absolutely.
one uniform way to be able to explain something to someone. And I think that's something that you learn over time, be able to say this person is not going to, respond to the same stimulus that the next person is.
100, you're part-time with coach, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever the proper one is. Absolutely. Counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something you mentioned in there in terms of one of the mistakes that you had made the early growth of when you were doing this, in terms of powering a lot of movements. And I heard you talk about somewhere, one of your podcasts, not really liking doing heavy lifts. And I wanted to bring this up with Chad on board here, because I think it's an interesting topic. One, maybe fits along the same lines of like the younger generation thinking that they need the PR every time they go into the gym.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, how unrealistic that is, and how PRs go down over time.
You don't PR, the workout was a failure.
Right, exactly.
Didn't do anything.
How unrealistic these things are. But one, where did this dislike of heavy lifts come from? But also, it's more of a question for Chad too, and maybe to help elaborate the way you, as a lifter, Chad, how realistic is it, and how often are you working on what would be a 90+% lift in your daily training, and how much would you actually recommend that to the everyday CrossFitter? Is that realistic to even try to achieve? So maybe first part to you, Pat, and then I'll pass it to you, Chad.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dave, this is, wait, what time is it? How long do we have? This is just extremely loaded, but I'll do the best I can. But I would be interested to hear, Pat, what you have to say on that. Especially, I'm offended your dislike of lifting heavy, man. Where'd that come from?
I don't know. I guess just to be very frank and honest, I found it profoundly boring. I know it is extraordinarily mission critical and effective and beneficial. And because of that, I exert the discipline to never avoid it. But I don't particularly enjoy it. I also don't enjoy 800-meter repeats in the track.
Right.
But I do them because I understand the value. I don't like working on my L-sit, but I do them. I don't like skinless chicken breast and broccoli compared to.
What do you like in the gym, Pat?
I really don't like working out. I've been actually very open and honest about this. I've had a lot of suffering and discomfort in my younger days, and I'm not a masochist that enjoys suffering, and there's a degree of suffering and discomfort needed to drive the needle forward, an appropriate level, right? I mean, too much and we wear the athlete out, hurt them, burn them out, no good. Not enough, and we're not driving the needle forward. But that nice little sweet spot that has some inherent discomfort in there, I'd probably rather enjoy a cup of coffee and read a book. And if I can snap my magic fingers and be a beast, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Again, it gave me an extra hours back a day. I could do amazing things with an hour. But that's not the world that we live in. So I exert the discipline on a regular basis to do things with my body, things with my diet, things with my finances, things with my child that particularly maybe aren't the most astonishing form of utopia and pleasure, but the benefit's worth it. And the payoff is worth it. And I understand the value of delayed gratification. And so I do those things.
Yeah. And for you, Chad, on just the programming side of it, one, I guess a question for you, Pat, just a follow-up is, what do you consider to be percentage-wise to be a heavy lift?
I would say, we do a whole range of things from, let's say it's a 7x1 deadlift sort of a day. For a lot of folks out there, I think when they get into the range of 80% or a little bit higher, that's numerically speaking, a heavy day, you did wonderful things for your central nervous system. You're going to drive the needle forward. But that's heavy on a 7x1 day. You can add heavy in a mixed modality metabolic conditioning deal in which I'm putting intentional interference in there with other workouts and pre-fatiguing you. And then what used to feel like 40% of your 1 rep max is plenty heavy relative to the stimulus that day of what we're doing. But if it's a classic sort of a heavy day and a 7x1, not like a 5x5, I'd say if somebody gets into 80% or higher, then that's a heavy day. But I also try to let people know that there's mathematical lifting chart heavy, which is great. And it's a great reference for sure. But that lifting chart has no idea how you slept last week. That lifting chart has no idea if you have a newborn baby in the house. That lifting chart has no idea if you've been under the worst stress at work you've ever had for the last month or something like that. And so that heavy, there's a mathematical component to it, and the barbell doesn't lie. But it's also a relative number based upon how you feel that day when you walk into the gym.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And that RPE is such a big component of it. And that's why I think for me, programming, even on the gymnastics side, like programming for an individual can't really be like a weekly thing. We kind of have to go, how you feeling that day, make adjustments according to what's going on within that particular situation, rather than saying, here's your month of programming, just do it as is.
Right. And I think that's where the education component of the individual comes in. And that education component is a lifelong journey that never stops, because it also depends upon what season of life are you in? What else do you have going on outside the walls of the gym? Are you in that amazing 27-year-old, not a care in the world, no responsibility, where you stretch for 90 minutes a day?
Right.
That's amazing.
Enjoy it.
Not a lot of us are in there for any period of time. Your tolerance to certain things might be different than somebody that doesn't have that going on, to somebody who's rushed and I got 30 minutes today or I got nothing. There's a way, and maybe both of those people, somebody that's got nothing but free time and somebody that's got 30 minutes crammed, maybe both of those people, based upon what they've done over the last 3 to 10 days, what makes sense today is going heavy, and what makes sense today is going below parallel, based upon where you've been. This is what you need. But even though both of those people need the same thing, the way in which they should go about it is going to be wildly different based upon the two incredibly different life scenarios that were just mentioned right there. And there's a way to skin both those cats, but that only comes through a lot of conversations, ideally a lot of these podcasts, a lot of shared information, so that people understand the more granular details of, yeah, I know that I need to go heavy today, and I know it's going to be rushed. I know I can't fit in a 5x5 back squat, but here's what I can do that's not ideal, but it's really darn good, and it will serve me well, and I'll be just fine on planet Earth.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds like my story right now. Sometimes I've got 30 minutes, sometimes I can stretch it out to an hour, or I have the ability to do as long of a workout as I can. But it's, just kind of using myself as an example to try to answer your question, Dave, to start this off. I'm training for a master's competition right now. It's 2.5 weeks away. I know, like, I programmed for myself for many, many years. I kind of know what I need. I can read my body pretty well, I think. So I have this general idea, like within the last 3 to 4 weeks, I need to hit, 2 to 3 heavy snatch sessions if I can, 2 to 3 heavy clean and jerk sessions, on top of a few other snatch and clean and jerk workouts that are lighter or medium or CrossFit type workouts, to be honest with you, to get me in shape and to where I need to go. So I'm familiar enough with heavy loads that I can get the most out of myself. And that works. It's, I've been doing that. I've built myself back up to some decent numbers, and I feel ready for the competition. So I'm able to go in there and say, okay, I want this to be one of those heavy snatch days. But if I go in and things aren't clicking and I'm not feeling great, then I'm like, okay, you know what? I have the ability to shut that down, get in 3 sets of 2 with 60 or 70% instead of trying to go 80, 90, 95%. And then I'll push that off to a different day. Now, how can I lead someone else to do that? And really depending on what level they're at and how long they've been doing it. I've been doing this for many, many years, over 20 years. I've gone through phases of, snatching and clean and jerk heavy multiple times a day, multiple times a week, over and over and over again, front squatting heavy, deadlifting heavy, constantly in my early and mid 20s. And I would say that more than anything, I got away with that. Yes, I benefited from it, but I also took it too far and overtrained, if that's what you want to call it, in different occasions. And so that has led me to be able to write my own programming now and make adjustments on the fly to get the most out of myself as I'm peaking. Now, someone is trying to peak in weightlifting, for example, snatch and clean and jerk, whether that be just a general test day or a competition, they do need to have those heavy days that are 80% and above. I would say at least once a week for, 4 or 5 or 6 weeks leading into that, and manipulating those numbers and everything else. And I would say that they need 1 or 2 other days that are lighter, that are technique work, not only technique work, but are getting repetitions in to keep them, fine tuning their strength and their technique and everything else. And I would say for snatch and clean and jerk, if we're talking about around, I like that number 80%, Pat. And I would, sometimes I say 85% and above, I need 5 to 10 reps. Or if we want to say 75%, let's get 10 to 15 reps at 75% or above. And for that to really work, for me to really write that out and give that to someone, they've got to have some independence, some understanding, and some discipline to do some by feel stuff. It's hard to find those people and to teach them and get them to that point to where you can trust them and for them to get the most out of that. But that's the kind of general number I think they need to have: 10 to 15 reps at 75% or above. If they're not feeling good, let's go 75 or 80 for only 10 reps, or maybe only 5 reps. But if you're feeling good, then let's push it above. If we're talking about squats, I think the number is 30 reps. I need you at 30 reps at, depending on where we're at in the cycle, 70% or above, or 80% or above. 80% at 6 sets of 5 is a beautiful, very beneficial workout if you can build up the capacity and get through that type of thing. But you need to be doing that, I think heavy squats for sure once a week, and one other day that's pushing it very close to that to really gain the strength that you need. Maybe the same kind of thing in presses. But within all of that, for you to really get to where you want to go, you've got to have some lighter weeks and some lighter days. I like a heavy light principle where I'm pushing hard within those numbers and those percentages for 2 weeks, and then I make a point to go lighter. And depending on who you are and where we're at in the cycle, that lighter may only be 5 or 10% lighter, but it's less volume and less load, or it may be a lot less than that, but there's got to be a back off to get there. Now, coming back around and getting to what you're talking about too, with, beginners and intermediate, where do they fall into this, and how often should they be going heavy? It's really dependent. I just wrote one of my blog posts that I'm working on about, I was trying to compare the conventional deadlift start position to the snatch and clean start position, and just going into elaborating on when or should the power lifter incorporate Olympic lifting into their training, when or if the Olympic lifter should implement some conventional deadlifting or sumo deadlifting or powerlifting into their training. And then, okay, how about CrossFit? They do everything. When should they do conventional deadlifts and snatch and cleans? And my answer to that is that, very simple. And the way that we answer a lot of stuff, Dave, is that, well, we need to get some time and reps in with technique and make sure you understand quality and movement and all that stuff, and slowly progress into it over time. So it's hard to answer that question. But a beginner CrossFitter, for example, someone getting into CrossFit, they're within their first month, should they ever be lifting heavy in the snatch and clean and jerk? It depends on the person, but most likely not. Most likely not, because they probably haven't been to a CrossFit gym or under a coach that has progressed them inappropriately. They may be in their first month of CrossFit. They may have done it for 4 weeks, and they may not still know what a clean and jerk is. So if Grace comes up during that 4th or 5th week and they've not been progressed through cleans and jerks, they haven't been taught that, are you going to throw the barbell in their hand and let them do that workout? maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should do uh, kettlebell swings and presses, 30 kettlebell
Mhm.
swings and 30 presses to modify that. As you were talking about earlier too, Pat, there were times that you should have modified, and it's hard to do that. It's hard as a coach too in this community to say, I'm going to separate you from the community and have you do something different when I want you to have
Oh
fun. I
yeah.
want you to enjoy yourself. I want you to touch that barbell. So I think it's just a matter of progressing people in over a longer period of time, getting them that knowledge and understanding. And that kind of leads me to, we can elaborate on this more if you want, but as a gym owner for a number of years there, Pat, I fell into the trap of just quitting the fight and just letting people kind of more so do what they want, as opposed to holding to my standing behind what I believed in and saying, hey, this is the
Mhm.
type of coach that I am, and this is the type of gym that I am, like it or not. And then I'm going to end up with the people in the community that are going to benefit from this gym the most. So what has your experience been with that type of thing?
um, it's everything that you said there was very interesting, and we could spend probably far too much time on the previous topic as well, because I think another layer and nuance thing in the heavy discussion is what's heavy and what frequency of quote unquote heavy makes sense for the recreational athlete
Right.
pursuing general physical preparedness versus an
Hmm.
individual specifically training to peak on a day for a competition, and those are related because we're both lifting, but
Hmm.
wildly different,
Yep.
and that
Yep.
I think is just another interesting layer there. But that question is that question you just asked about the gym and the ownership and the culture and what you're going to do and principles. That's a great one, and things have worked out quite well with Linchpin, but I think it's potentially just dumb luck, to be honest with you, because Linchpin has evolved over the years now, um, but what it started as, it continues on to this day, which was, first of all, I just love. First of all, I love programming. I'm a programming nerd. Like it's just I can't shut my brain off. Like I find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and so I always just wanted to put workouts out there no matter what. And I felt like there's just a lot of noise on the internet, and so I wanted to give people ideally a place to cut through the noise. And when I first started just putting the workouts out there in 2014 is when I affiliated my garage. And it was just my garage affiliate. It was just me and my wife working out, and somebody was like, look, hey, you're programming every day. You're doing this stuff every day. You love to do it. You never know where it's going to go. Why don't you just affiliate your garage? Why not? And I was like, fair enough. Why not? Who cares? And so when I did, and I started putting out workouts every day, I didn't have anyone to worry about as to whether or not they liked it or not.
Hmm.
It was just me and my wife working out. So if tomorrow's a 5K and nobody would have shown up for the 5 p.m. class because they don't like 5Ks, not my problem. Like if that's what makes sense and what drives the needle forward, that's what's going to get programmed, because it's not a popularity contest. And so from the very get-go, I think I was fortunate and blessed and just lucky, quite frankly. That's how it all started. It started with not trying to appease the 5 p.m. class. It was,
Hmm.
if it works and it's what's needed, it gets posted. If it's effective, it gets posted. If it's popular, I don't care. Like we're gonna do what works, and 2 people will like it or 20,000 people like it. I don't know, but we're gonna do what works, and that's that. And I guess what's cool is there apparently was a desire for for that, because I mean, man, if you go to our affiliates Instagram account, it's the most boring Instagram account potentially all on social media. I mean, it's just a gray background with black text. That's it. There's no half naked, ripped athletes dripping with sweat with
Hmm.
what is supposed to be like a candid shot, but it's not a candid shot, and like look at it. It's zilch. It is a gray background with a black text workout. And so again, anybody who's doing that must be actually interested in that, because there's no flash, there's no nothing there. And if it didn't work, it would have died, because it's not an interesting social media channel. And so that luckily is how it began, and just how it stayed to this day. And not in and it's not meant to be like in an abrasive jerk sort of a fashion, like, you don't like it, too bad, beat it, scram somewhere else for you. But I couldn't, whether it was popular or not popular, it wouldn't have changed what the workout was every day, because I wanted to just, in my opinion anyway, and I'm always open to the fact that I'm dead wrong, I just wanted to put out what I truly felt was the unfiltered truth, unaffected by sponsors, unaffected by whatever it happened to be. The truth in fitness: this works, this will treat you right. You may not like it, because we're going to do a 5K or the 800-meter repeats or strict gymnastics work, or you're just going to lift heavy. And we're not going to try to do like a little cookie at the end to make you feel good. It's like, no, I really want you just to pour your heart and soul into a 5x5 back squat, and really take 3 to 4 minutes rest between each one of those sets of 5, shocking as that is, so you can really lift heavy every time, instead of trying to smash it into a 15-minute window before something else, and then you wonder why your lifts aren't going up, and then you think you need to lift more because you're already lifting every day, but it's not working, but you're not really doing it well, or with virtuosity, or with the rest periods to truly allow your body to do it. So we're going to do less, but we're going to do it better. And in doing that, we're also not going to try to just beat the stuffing out of ourselves every day for no reason. And having days where you look at it and you go, that's it? Yes, that's it. Because that will allow tomorrow, when I want you to take off like a rocket ship with intensity, you don't feel like the Walking Dead, that you're actually ready to express some intensity. And we're going to have those nice ups and downs. And the truth is, all related to your question, that's not going to appeal to everybody. Yeah. It's not. And I'm okay with that. But I couldn't program a different way, and I couldn't look myself in the mirror if I just put out what I thought would be clickbait on social media. And so that was kind of it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I don't know if this is going to make sense, but hearing you talk and listening to someone that is so passionate about programming and putting things together. Do you ever see the movie Ratatouille? It's like my favorite Pixar.
Yeah, our kids watched it a while ago. I was in and out of the room, but I know what you're talking about.
I love that movie. For anybody who hasn't seen it, definitely watch it. It's like an amazing Pixar movie. But there's a part in the movie where the rat eats a strawberry, and he's like, wow, this tastes really good. And then he eats a piece of cheese, and he's like, wow, this cheese is really good. And then he eats them together, and he's like, wow, like my mind is blown when these things are combined. And that's what I think about when we put CrossFit workouts together, is this idea of like taking one movement, and it's like, this is great movement by itself. And we take another movement, this can be great by itself. But the idea and the complexity that you can create when you have someone with a great mind that can create something different and unique and apply these movements that can sometimes be simplified and put them into something that never tried before. It's something, when I was watching that movie, I was like, this is actually, what's that?
I mean, they're beautiful. Like
right.
A workout that, I mean, they're beautiful. And a lot of times I think, and everyone has, it's probably like art, right? Like everyone has a different taste or whatnot. But a lot of times I think personally, some of the most beautiful ones out there, whether I program them or not, doesn't matter, like just a beautiful workout, it's just simple and it's subtle and you don't see it coming and it's almost a trap. And then you get in the middle of it and you're like, what just happened?
Another layer.
Everybody sees some miserable, brutal monstrosity coming, like of course, sure. But something, the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, it takes some creativity. It takes a little bit of that artistic touch to be able to get something out of a workout like that someone's not anticipating. We put announced the Masters Fitness Collective workout, myself, Chad, and Chris Hinshaw a few weeks ago, the first workout that they had. And it had a little bit of that. It was programmed in a way that we hadn't seen before, where the person was almost like choose your own adventure, 3 movements, and depending on your strengths and weakness, you could align the workout however you wanted. You just had to complete that particular task before you can move on to the next. So it was done in a way that was like, someone put some real thought into this. If you just jumped into this, you would think it was another workout. But those kind of things to me are unique in the sense that you can be so creative if you allow the person to kind of, sit down and say, I have this breadth of exercise that I choose from, but putting them together can create something so unique.
Yes, and I think another part of the beauty that I wish I could take credit for articulating it well, but I did not. Adrian Bosman said it far better than I did. He basically said that, and I agreed with him, beautiful, quintessential, effective, CrossFit programming is delivering the maximum amount of fitness, the maximum amount of breadth and depth of capacity with the smallest amount of time in the gym possible. Like, that's tough to do.
Sure.
Really tough to do. If you have a human being that can tolerate more work and not break down, like they can actually tolerate it and thrive, well, of course, if I can give you 3 and 4 different things to do every day, and we're gonna have a track session, this session, and you don't break down, well, yeah, well, that's gonna go really, really far. And that makes sense because we're working 4 different things. So of course they're all improving. Of course, we gotta doing your track session, you're doing your Ollie lifting, doing whatever. But when you don't lift every day and you don't really seem to have a focus, let's say, on the deadlift, and you don't really actually pull a heavy deadlift with any regularity, maybe you haven't pulled a 7x1 single in 8 weeks, and then it comes up again and you PR, that's confusing. And that's cool. And that's beautiful. And that's hard to do. But it makes sense that if you dead every week, you're like, hey, I deadlift every week and my deadlift goes up. You're like, well, I can follow the bouncing ball on that. That makes perfect sense. And you're like, I don't deadlift that much. And every time I do, it's more. And I'm not a novice lifter. I've been doing this like 10, 11 years. I'm confused.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a win.
That's beautiful. And that's the trick. And I think what a lot of programmers, myself included, didn't get initially was, how to say it, because I don't want to use the word better on a workout because then we'd have to define what better means. But for lack of another way to say it, I'll say better. A lot of times, when programming, I'm creating a week or whatever it is, and I lay it out as to where we need to go. Or when I get it done and then I go back and I look at it, I usually hate it. I think it's ugly and stupid, and I don't know why I'm doing this, and this is ridiculous, and I should throw it in the trash. And I just polish it, and I polish it, and I polish it, and I polish it, and little tweaks and moves until it eventually gets where it's like, yes, I'm really happy with this. I will release this to the world. But what's interesting is that polishing process is usually reducing what I put on the paper. Very infrequently is it significantly adding to what I put on the paper. And that, I think, it took me a while to figure out, and that's probably something that just might treat other people as well. It's usually the reduction and taking the scalpel and trying to figure out what is not necessary right here, and what is just the quintessential mission critical elements. And those work really well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton, but are there 1 or 2 workouts that really stand out to you in terms of like ones that resonated well with you, ones that you really enjoy doing that you've programmed that are like, I love this one, I like coming back to this one, I love doing it or hate doing it for all the right reasons?
There was one, I'm gonna mess up what the rep range was on it, but it was, and maybe this is so silly that as soon as I say it, someone's like, well, yeah, of course that was a stinger, of course. But it wasn't, it was with a pair of dumbbells, like a pair of 50-pounders for the men, a pair of 35s for the women. It was thrusters and burpees. Now I know immediately, like, well, of course that stung, but the rep range was really low, and that was the sneaky little thing about it. I think it was only like 12.96 or something like that. Like it was not much at all. And I think it was initially, and I think it was 2 couplets back to back. I think it was 6, 9, 12. So the initial one was an ascending deal because you're fresh, you just started. 6 burpees, 6 thrusters, whoop-de-doo, 9 and 9. Then you just suffer through the 12. Then like 3 minutes later, you did it again, but it descended 12, 9, 6, because now that you're fatigued a little bit, let you start with the big ones and it goes down. And I'm actually one of those weird, I don't mind thrusters and say I'm good at them, but I don't mind them. And I actually don't mind dumbbell thrusters. And I was like, this is going to be a good one for me. I'm going to knock this out of the park. And I did not knock it out of the park. It knocked me out of the park, and everyone else reported a very similar deal. So, just some of those, again, just simple, elegant, like in an old school, like mathematical sense. I really, ones that when you look at them, give the athlete an opportunity to express intensity. Give the athlete the opportunity to push decently, right? Not by overwhelming them so much with rep range or loading or whatever happens to be, that from the very get-go you're suffocating them and they're broken down. And it's there's a place for that. There's a place for the grinder, unquestionably. But if we're talking about, most circumstances, most people, most of the time, and what gets the most bang for the buck that drives things forward, it's those moderate loading, moderate rep range, some complementary movements, and in a way that allows the athlete to exert themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to just chat. I know you probably want to jump in. Just give me 2 more seconds here on the workout side. One, right before we jumped on, Jordan was mentioning early on in his CrossFit career, he did Sherwood, the workout named in your honor.
I don't even know what that is.
You know this workout?
I didn't know that existed.
Jordan, do you want to?
Yeah, it was down at Reebok headquarters. It was in 2011, and you had just been down there, I think, for like a seminar or something. And I showed up, and Denise was like, "This is the workout we're doing today." We wrote it. I don't know if she said we wrote it, but she said it's written for Pat Sherwood. And I was like, "Oh, all right." Like, I didn't really know who you were at that point, but it was, and I'm going to screw up the reps too, but it was something like 5 rounds of like 12 overhead squats at 115, a 400-meter run, and then like 1 or 2 rope climbs or something. And it smashed me. And I thought it was something you had known about, but apparently not.
No,
Interesting.
I'll have to ask Denise about that.
Yeah, and also I had heard that you're not a huge fan of overhead squats. So I was like, oh, he threw in some exercises that are not his strengths in there.
That's probably, I'll keep it short, but that's one of those things, getting back to what we spoke about earlier on in the podcast. I've probably gritted through some movements like that longer than I should. Actually, the workout for Lynchman today is Nancy with overhead squats and 400 meters run. And I've got terrible overhead position, nothing from CrossFit, just from military accidents, motorcycle wrecks, terrible overhead. And I think I suffered through a position that I probably should have abandoned or modified for far too long from just being a knucklehead. And so like today's Nancy, I'm going to warm up, and I just don't know how I'm going to feel after the warm up. If the shoulders feel good, Nancy will be at 95 pounds and will overhead squat. It might be at 75 pounds, or it might be a front squat day. If overhead just seems to be bordering on negligent, I will get my ego out of there, and it'll be a front squat Nancy, and I'll be okay.
Yeah, athlete ownership, big component. Recognize where you are on that particular day. You keep mentioning Lynchpin. For the listeners out there who don't know, you're an affiliate owner. You're in Washington. You're actually not that far away from me in Portland now. So. We're Pacific Northwesterners these days.
Finally get some sunshine.
I know. Maybe getting into the hundreds this week. So we got to deal with that.
Welcome. It's been like 106 to 110 for the last 2 weeks straight here in Texas.
Yeah, you're in Texas.
Where in Texas are you?
I'm about an hour north of Austin.
Oh man, my goal is to potentially, Texas is on my maybe one day list.
There you go.
Good for you, man.
Heck yeah.
I wanted to ask about your particular gym, because I know you make a heavy emphasis about intensity over volume in terms of how you program. But, Chad and I and Power Monkey, we're so technique focused in what we do. I'm just kind of curious where technique falls into your programming and where you view that in terms of the everyday CrossFitter needing to put an emphasis.
Nobody needs technique. It's overrated.
Perfect. All
Only
right. Thank
that
you.
There you
matters
go.
is time on the
Done
wall
deal.
and the barbell loading.
Just do it. Just do it.
That's gonna be your
Rip it and rip it,
your
man.
headline
Yeah.
flip from
Rip
this
it and rip it.
podcast.
Yeah, somebody will quote snipe that, and I'll
Yeah,
send it later
absolutely.
on. Why Pat Sherwood said on an interview. It's funny. So every Friday, I create a video that goes out to the community, not public, but to the community, and it discusses the upcoming week's workouts, and the title of it is Modulating Intensity. And so I tell them every week, although CrossFit is constantly varied function moves at high intensity, that's just a very short number of words on what's actually like an hour-long lecture. So that's not really all that you need to know. And high intensity, although it's in the description, does not mean maximal intensity. And that does not mean that's what you should do every workout, every day that you walk into the gym. That will not serve most people very well for very long. Either physically, emotionally, whatever it happens to be, you're probably going to hit a brick wall. And just like we vary our loading, our movements, our rep range, our time domains, whatever you want to say, we should vary and modulate our intensity as well. So I generally program 5 workouts over the course of the week. Thursdays and Sundays are rest days. And over the course of 5 workouts, I personally, and I express this every week, I try to really push it, so to speak, and go high intensity, relative to my capacity on 2 of those 5 days. It's only 40% of the time, less than half. And I think people find that shocking. And then the other 60% of the time will be moderate, could be a low intensity in there. And then usually one day out of the week, I don't even turn the clock on. And so I allow myself to just work out at whatever darn pace I want without the external pressure. And even if it's a workout that's come up before, could be Helen, right? And so you want to know your Helen time because it's your 10th time doing Helen. And I'll do Helen and not know my time, and I'll still get fit and life will be great. And so modulating intensity is a big deal. And I always tell people, regardless of whether it's a moderate intensity day or a high intensity day or a low intensity day, whatever speed that you're going, that you're making that delineation to intensity with, don't ever go faster than you can move well. There's the very short encapsulation of it. Only move at a pace that you can move well and properly. Because if you're not still doing this stuff 5 to 10 years from now, then we're not doing it right, quite frankly. So you want to be moving yourself in a way that not only, I don't know, everyone loves to brag in the workout time, right? Like put up a good time, but move in a way that is sustaining your long-term health and fitness. Don't so much be worried about winning today, be worried about winning this decade or the next decade, quite frankly.
Love it. Longevity, absolutely something we preach endlessly. Chad, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, I love everything that you're saying, Pat, of course. And I think that when we're talking about programming, putting a program together for other athletes or yourself, whatever, but especially other athletes, probably the most challenging part, and I would say beautiful part that brings it all together, are those moderate and light days. Because I think it's easy to program heavy. Like that's incredibly easy. That's no problem. I put that down first. That's done. However, I do that twice a week or whatever. Those are in there. I know where those are going. I'm going to spread those out, Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday, whatever makes sense.
I put those in first as well.
Exactly. And then I'm going to program everything else around that. That's the artistic and creative part of it. But when I was saying earlier about myself, when I'm able to adjust on the fly, again, if I'm trying to snatch heavy this day and it's not happening, then I can go lighter. That hardly ever happens. And it hardly ever happens because I am purposely putting those heavy workouts in where I want them. And I'm putting in purposeful, moderate and lighter days. And that controls my ability to go heavy when I want to go heavy. Yeah. That's why I can peak, because I've worked through that system and I'm not maxing out the same week in training as I'm maxing out in that competition. But that allows us to control your body. I'm talking about me programming for someone else the best that we possibly can. We can't control everything because there's too many factors involved, but we can give you the best chance by you following the guidelines of moderate and light intensity. and then go after it. When we say go after it, go after it. That's for fun, and that's for your progress and your overall ability as well. But sorry, I'm just looking at my notes because I've got a lot of things to say. I'm losing my thoughts here. But
You're totally
yeah.
right. I mean, you just can't smash yourself every day, be it with loading or intensity. That check will come due.
Yeah, but another part of this too is we're talking about technique. How important is technique to you? How important is technique to us? And how do we relate that to our athletes? And I think a part of that is getting them to be moderate or light on the days that need to be moderate and light, to give them an opportunity to move with, a lower skilled movement or a progressed movement or a lighter load to help them improve that technique. So that's another big component of it as well. And all this, bringing all this together. I loved what you said earlier, Pat, where you go back and you nitpick and you spend however much time on taking stuff out. It reminds me of, I can't remember who said this or where I heard it, but this guy had written this really, really long note to someone. And he said at the beginning or end of the note, say, "I'm sorry for the really long note, but I didn't have time to make it short."
Yes.
And so it's like, it's just, I love what you said there, because
Love
if
that
you
quote,
see,
by the way.
yeah, and maybe you know what it is and you can remind me. I've got to
remember
find
who
it and
said
write it down,
I'm
but
familiar with it.
yeah. But it's like, if you see a workout up that is moderate or lighter, whatever it is, and it looks very simple and like, oh, that somebody just threw that up out of nowhere, that was easy to come up with. Most likely it wasn't. Most likely it took some time to really get down to the simplest, most effective version.
And your conversation on technique, this all relates back to what we said earlier about how do you get people to avoid mistakes that you've made, et cetera, et cetera. And different people respond to different cues or different explanations, whatever it happened to be. But the technique component or topic or whatever it happens to be, I almost feel like if you could have a conversation with somebody, it doesn't matter what they're looking for out of their physical fitness routine, technique gets you there. So do you want to be the baddest man or woman, fastest in there? Well, technique will allow you to your contractile potential, the energy that you're expending, the exertion, you're going to get more out of it moving better compared to poorly. So if you want to beat everybody in the class and do all these things, technique is your friend. You want to lift more, technique is your friend. You want to do whatever, technique is your friend. You don't care about that. You just care about being healthy and working out forever. Technique is your friend. Like there's almost no conversation that ends in, yeah, actually, you're not paying attention to technique. That's going to achieve your goals faster. Like that, there's nothing that leads there. So technique is this universal deal, almost regardless of what you want to get out of it. The keys to the kingdom go through moving well.
Yeah, I obviously we couldn't agree more, and I love the way you put that, because I think being able to convey that to the everyday user, everyday person in the gym, is a hard part for the coach and the owner that maybe doesn't come from a really high technical background where they can show the movements, and so they're like, trust us. How do we trust you? And so having that buy-in is really difficult for a lot of owners and coaches out there.
Just yanking on the barbell is not going to increase that clean.
Yeah.
I wish that it would.
I mean, maybe for the first couple of weeks, or month or whatever, but yeah.
Then you plateau and you're like, dang it, I got to lower the weight now.
Or something gets banged up and then you can't be in the gym for a while. And then, we know how that leads to.
Well, and that's the thing too, talking about you get banged up. That's another part of, again, going back to why we want those moderate and light days, is because you can either put those in and do them, or you're going to be forced to do them. Right? If you just bang your head against the wall for weeks or months on end, you're going to be knocked out for a certain amount of time, or you're going to be forced to lift lighter and do less. And so it's like one of my coaches back in high school, kind of similar, but in a different way, he said, we were doing a lot of conditioning at the beginning of the season, 2-a-days and stuff like that. And he said, you can pay me now or you can pay me later, meaning that you're either, if you don't do this conditioning and do what you need to do right now, then your performance is going to suffer on Friday nights on the football field. So it's kind of the same thing.
But then also with folks potentially getting banged up, and I don't want to make some broad sweeping generalizations, but it's one of my strong suits, is these days with potentially with CrossFit and the GPP, the CrossFit athlete, not somebody who's a dedicated Olympic lifter, dedicated power lifter, whatnot, there is this, everyone's enamored with the barbell and lifting heavy. And as I said before, I understand the profound benefits of doing it, and you need to do it, but not at the exclusion of everything else, because so I think there's a lot of people rushing to big weights with the barbell these days that not only maybe aren't there yet with the barbell technique wise and all those things, but haven't built some other bases of their pyramid with their metabolic conditioning or the gymnastics work. I try to tell people, I actually think gymnastics out of everything does not get the respect or time that it deserves.
Agreed.
And those days, not a barbell in sight, are profoundly difficult, more than people realize, are usually the sleepers that catch people off guard. And then since you didn't just beat the stuffing out of yourself every day with loading, well, you're ready to lift heavy on those other days because you didn't feel the need to have a barbell in your hand every single day of your life as a GPP CrossFit recreational athlete. And while I'm not a talented Olympic lifter or gymnast, I'm married to a Division I gymnast, so I have a profound respect for it as well. I could talk to an Olympic lifter or a power lifter, and we could go through all these lifts, and they could say, can you do this? Now, maybe it would be with an empty barbell, right? But my answer would generally be yes. Can you do this movement? Yes. Don't look good. Can do it. Empty barbell, training bar, yes. The list would basically be all yeses, I think. And then with a gymnast, they would say like 5 things. I'd be like, yes, I can do a push-up. Yes, I can do a pull-up. Yes, I can do a sit-up. Then they would name 150 things that I would say, no, I actually can't even remotely mimic what you're doing.
Right.
And so you have this huge area of which people have infant level capacity, newborn baby level capacity. And then this area with the barbell that most people are pretty darn good with. And for some odd reason, they feel they need more of the barbell, even though they have no capacity, generally speaking, in this huge area. And it's like, I find that hard to believe. It defies logic. And don't you think if we believe that variance is a wonderful thing and working on your weaknesses is a wonderful thing, and doing these things, working on your weaknesses, makes you a better athlete in ways that exercise scientists really even kind of struggle to figure out why that worked, but it does. Do you think maybe we should spend more time in this area that's so challenging for you? It's like, nah, it's boring. Let's go get another lifting session. And it's like,
working hard to change that mentality, Pat.
That's
working
a tough
hard
to crack as well, for sure.
Absolutely is. But, working hard to give people some insight into how to tackle that properly and make it fun.
Basic gymnastics will make a really good CrossFitter look like they have never worked out a single day in their life.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where that deadlift PR comes with the athlete that doesn't deadlift heavy on a regular basis, as you were mentioning earlier, Pat, is the programming that is going to be all encompassing, that is going to work on all these things, that's going to make you a better, healthier human in general, a better overall, more complete athlete. If you can squat 500 pounds, but you can't do one strict pull-up, there's an imbalance there. If you can't sprint in, just using this for an example, because when I was first doing a lot of CrossFit, I couldn't sprint in anything for a minute straight. So if I tried to do as many burpees as I could in a minute, I had to slow down somewhere in the middle of that. So when I worked up to the ability to actually go as hard as possible and keep the same pace for a minute in burpees, it was an exciting day for me, because I knew that as an athlete, I became more complete, even though in weightlifting, I didn't necessarily completely need to be able to sprint for a minute. I knew that I had opened up some potential,
Undoubtedly. I think that's the one thing that plays out over and over again is variance is a beautiful thing, and largely not completely understood from like a physiology scientific exactly why does this person who you don't think needs pull-ups because their sport doesn't really demand it, but then you get them pull-ups and for some mysterious reason things seem to go better. We can't kind of put our finger on it, but it happens so darn often that I have to assume it's fact.
Yep.
Variance is a gorgeous thing, and variance takes a degree of discipline to put yourself in positions that are outside of your comfort zone in movements and loadings and time domains and things where you're not the hero in the class, but those people who are willing to do that and, push those margins of their experience or comfort zone, I think that the benefits are tremendous, absolutely tremendous.
Yeah. Well, this conversation can go on for quite a while, guys. I think it's all stuff that we love talking about and the community loves to hear. There are a couple things I want to get to before we get you out of here, Pat, if that's cool. One is, you have so many roles in the community, whether that be an owner, affiliate owner. You work very closely with HQ in a lot of different areas, but you're also, closely tied to the games in terms of commentating and knowing what's going on with what we're going to be seeing in about 10 days or next week now. I just want to get a couple predictions from you. Anything that you're anticipating seeing, anything that, any kind of strange predictions, anybody that you might see kind of come out of nowhere to end up on a podium, either the women's side or the men's side?
I'm more out of touch, in full disclosure, this year than ever before, because you probably can't hear it, but there's a crazy little 12-year-old baby girl scampering all around the house. So that has been a wonderful but wild distraction over the course of the last 12 months. I'd be shocked if the two returning champions don't once again do their thing. And as far as what to be on the lookout for, so this year, for the first time, it's Adrian Bosman's show.
Right.
Very interesting. And I remember having a conversation with him, and I was like, look, I could be wrong, right? Usually if something is changed and different, people just dissect it and attack, and it's change. We hate change. I said, so Boz, you're going to be under the scrutiny this year, no matter what you program for the games, because it's different. You're going to be looked at with a harsher lens, even if it's all great. I said, so you know what? You might as well bring the heat, dude, because it's going to be, no matter what you do, you're going to be, blog posts and podcasts and let's dissect this. You know what? Bring the darn heat. So I'm not quite sure what's coming, but I look forward to seeing what he pulls out of his hat. He's a very capable, competent, profoundly sharp individual. So I look forward to seeing what he throws at the athletes.
Amazing. I can't wait to, with Boz's background, a little bit in circus and some gymnastics in there. I'm hoping that some technique work might show up on the gymnastics side. I might see some interesting new things.
And Boz, he understands, he gets it at a level that not too many people get it, and so I'm excited. I can't wait to see what it is.
Excellent. Well, can't wait to check it out as well. And before we get you out of here, are you cool answering some quick rapid fire questions?
Oh man. Okay. All right. I can't promise
as rapid as you
sharp or
can.
intelligent.
Well, first one's fairly easy. But what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh, jeez. They both reduce me to rubble, but probably weightlifting. I'm probably make Chad very happy here. Probably weightlifting.
Even with a wife who was a D1 gymnast.
Oh, I mean, it's funny. I don't want to just show, I think I'm doing really well, man. Like I'm trying my best. And she'll watch me do pull-ups and she'll just shake her head. And I'm like, look, I'm working on my kit for 16 years. And she's like, all right, fine.
Hey, you know what? I was going to dig into why, but I'm not even going to do it. I'm going to take the win on that one.
Take the win, Chad. Take the win. Number two, any person you've come across recently that might be a good guest for us to have on the podcast?
Oh, interesting. I don't have one off the top of my head, but can I take a rain check and email you fellas if it pops into my head?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's a good question.
That works for us. Maybe we can get Boz on at some point. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I'm sure post games and comes down from that, and you can, see if he brought the heat or not.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into them on that. That'd be awesome. Just a few more here. Any books you've come across here recently that you would recommend to our listeners? It can be about anything.
Yes. So there's one, your listeners may hate me. It's from Thomas Sowell. I don't know who Thomas Sowell is, but I'm a huge Thomas Sowell fan. He's an economist, just a general thinker in general. I think he's in his 80s or 90s now. But he wrote a book called Basic Economics. As terribly boring as that sounds, if there's a way to make economics not boring, he did it. It's like a 600-page book.
Okay.
But it was fascinating. And to me, this actually, I think, relates to our conversation. Reading that book, when I finished it, it made me realize how much I did not understand economics. Only through reading that book and getting all that knowledge, I understood the depths of my own ignorance. I was like, oh, all these times that I was weighing in on the economy or weighing in on what I thought great fiscal policy would be, I had no darn idea what I was talking about. And so I like books like that that kind of help me understand how much I actually don't know. And it's a very useful topic. Understanding finances is a good thing. So Basic Economics, I would say, is one. And then Empire of the Summer Moon. I don't know if you've heard that one. I can't remember who wrote it, but that was one of those books that when I started it, I looked forward to reading it every day and didn't want to put it down.
All right. Well, we appreciate those recommendations. And that first one sounds like something we all need. So hopefully the listeners will take that in. Anything you got coming up you want folks to know about, or where can we keep up with you?
Man, no, nothing crazy. Just doing the life thing, just trying to do this crazy thing called life. And people can find me on social media. My normal Instagram is just Sherwood 215. CrossFit Linchpins is just CrossFit Linchpin on Instagram. That's our website as well. And other than that, I'll just be trying my best to stave off decrepitude and keep up with my darn kids. It's a full-time job.
Oh, it definitely is. And Pat, man, we appreciate you coming on. It was definitely an absolute pleasure. Much respect, and appreciate everything that you do in the community, and look forward to continuing to watch you do your thing. To our listeners out there, as always, we very much appreciate you guys listening in. Be sure to head over to Powder Monkey Fitness for services and upcoming events. Also check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.